All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. It's so good to see you here. You are in for a treat today. Welcome to our program called Leadership Behaviors That Foster Psychological Safety. Whew, that's a lot. I'm Michelle Beauchamp, owner of the Champ Group. I partner with companies and individuals to help them unleash their inner champ, primarily in the areas of leadership and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Look at this amazing panel that we have for you today. I am honored that they said yes to my request to join us today. So you are going to be so happy that you joined. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And what I want to do first, though, is go ahead in the comments and tell us that you're here. We're so glad that you're here today. Go ahead and put your name in the comments. And as we're going through the program, we want to encourage you to engage with us. Ask questions, put comments, and then what we'll be able to do is address some of your questions or comments as we go through the program. So we really want to encourage you to do that. So hey to you, and thank you for coming to learn and grow with us. So I want to start with our panel. So Trina Fleming, tell us who you are and what you do.
Good morning, Michelle, and thank you for having me. My name is Trina Fleming. I am the VP of Employee Engagement, Training, and Corporate Responsibility at Lendistry. And Lendistry is the largest minority-led lender of capital to small businesses in the country, the first small business lending company ever in the United States. And we specialize in helping small businesses and all businesses really get to the next level so that they can support their families and the communities in which they operate.
That's a lot, Trina. Congratulations. You are serving such a great purpose. Thank you. And thank you for coming today. And then Vanessa Kelly. And where are you coming in from, Vanessa? And tell us what you do.
Hello, Michelle. Good to see you again. I met Michelle because she partnered with my law firm, Clark Hill, so that we could put together an allyship program. So I can vouch for her, the ways that she works collaboratively with clients, and she's just amazing. So love, love, love her. I'm Vanessa Kelly, and I am an employment lawyer with Clark Hill. I have licenses in New York and New Jersey, but work in South Carolina because I am fully remote. I'm passionate about leadership and work with my clients to help them through the questions that keep them up at night. We try to have compliant workplaces. And unfortunately, if they get sued, I am their advocate in court. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me here. Love this topic.
Thank you so much. And it sounds like you have a lot of experience with it as well, Vanessa. Thank you. And thank you for that compliment. I appreciate that. And Loretta, tell us who you are and what you do.
Good morning and thank you. It's such an honor to be here, Michelle. I truly, truly appreciate the invitation. I am Loretta Jordan. I am the Assistant Vice President of Student Services at Santiago Canyon College in East Orange. I assist with student support services to ensure students move from community college onto university level and vocational education as desired by the student. And I also have a psychotherapy practice here in Orange, specializing in individual and couples therapy. So mental health and wellness is definitely a passion for me as well.
I tell you what, audience, see, aren't you glad you came? Because we have got a powerhouse panel today. So thank you everyone again. And I see some people telling us that they're here. So I want to give a shout out to Tom and Jeff and Vicky and Tom Drucker and Thomas Reynolds. So we're so glad. I mean, we've got people from lots of different areas too. So really happy to have everybody join us today. So we're going to just jump right in to the first topic, which is leaders set the temperature. And Loretta, you just said you are all about well-being. And one of the things about psychological safety is first, we have to be psychologically safe ourselves, right? And so checking in with ourselves, tell us a little bit about in your practice and at the school, what is it that you do to make sure that you're okay, that we can emulate?
Well, one of the things that we as leaders need to be cognizant of on a regular basis and being mindful is the fact that we start our day and end our day as humans. If everyone, whomever is viewing, I would imagine most people have had an opportunity to be on an airplane. And so I use this analogy ad nauseum. If you've heard it before, please, I apologize in advance. But I love to allow people to have a framework of the flight attendant when they're telling us in the event of a cabin pressure change to please put on your mask first if you're with a child. And the reason for that is because if we attend to someone else without attending to ourselves, then we may not be available because we literally on a plane situation might pass out from a lack of oxygen. But if you think of it from a mental health and wellness perspective within a leadership environment, if we ourselves aren't well within our environment, our personal space, our mental health, if we come from a trying experience, a family or a personal experience at home, you're going to come to work still perseverating potentially and ruminating on what's going on in your own life. And how then are you going to be effective in guiding and developing your colleagues, your peers, or your direct reports? So we first have to attend to ourselves so that we can effectively address and make those around us feel safe.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a great point. I mean, we do have to take care of ourselves first. So the mask on the airplane, take care of yourself. You give yourself oxygen first. I don't think we can ever get tired of that, Loretta. So I'm glad you remind us about that because it's
Thank
so
you.
important. And then here's a part two to that. The importance of, making sure that we check in. I think that during COVID, we learned that we can't just get to the agenda. We have to see how people are doing. And so that has to do with setting the temperature first too. Like if it seems like people are upset or there's just not good energy, then it's important for us to check in with our people and see how they're doing because our role is to make everyone feel warm and good and like they belong, right? So setting the temperature first for ourselves and then others is very important.
Right.
And kind of to
And I
that,
will say, so if I could just add to that, I think
yeah,
that's really important because also when it's okay for a leader to not be okay and to say to
mhm,
their team, you know what, I'm having a little bit of a trying time right now. I think it makes it safe for then the team to recognize, okay, I can speak up because I'm also having a little bit of an issue. So I think that is really important about setting the temperature.
Right.
giving people permission. Yeah, thank you. And again, we got a comment from Melinda. Thank you, Melinda. She's like, I love that analogy. See, Loretta, you're never gonna get old. She's like, I'll remember it now. Put on your oxygen mask first, and then you can help others. So very, very good. And Trina, thank you. You're absolutely right. Um, so let me ask you this. One of the things that I have been reading about and observing myself is that collaboration has gone down, has definitely declined. And Trina, one of the things that you talked about was the importance to use the right language to boost collaboration. Can you elaborate on that?
I can. I think it is really important that in order to build your team, in order to make them feel safe, is a constant reminder about being a team. One of the things I stopped doing a while ago is speaking in terms of me and my, you and your, and speaking more about us and we, even
Mm,
in negative situations. So sometimes, maybe someone let the ball drop. But I usually will meet as a team, and instead of pointing that person out, I will say, our team let the ball drop on this or that. And it's
mm,
ironic too, because in almost every case, the person will raise their hand and say, you know what, that was me. Because they feel safe to doing it, because I'm willing to take it on as a team, that we as a team, we either succeed together or we don't together. And the other thing is we have to have each other's back, right?
mm,
So if someone is going a little bit down, it's all of our responsibility. It's not mine, it's not yours, it's all of ours. And so I am very intentional about using that language, again, in both positive situations. We all won, even maybe one person did most of the work, it's the team won. Or
mhm,
maybe someone dropped the ball, then it's, you know what, the team needs to improve. And I think that
mm.
language, and you can watch people's body language too. When you
Ooh,
say, especially if they know it's about to come out and you take it on yourself, they relax. And you can actually
mm,
feel them, you can see them physically go into safety mode. So I think it's
mm.
important to be intentional about that.
Yeah, I love that. I love too when you say we, the person, if it was just one person, they know, but they really appreciate you for including everyone in celebrations as well as opportunities for improvement, right? So that's awesome. And I
Right.
love the fact that you pay attention to the body language. So psychologically safe, you can see from the face, from the body, if they look tense or if they look relaxed. So that's
Mhm.
awesome. Thank you for saying that. Anybody else have anything else to add to that,
Yeah, I
Loretta?
was just going to add that by sharing it as a team responsibility, I think that not only reduces the individual who may have made, the misstep, eases their anxiety, but the rest of the team as well. Because some of
Mhm.
them may know that this person did, but rather than sit there and go, oh gosh, they're going to get grilled now, that's uncomfortable. Or they
Mhm.
also know that when the time comes and they've made a mistake, there's a soft landing. And it
Yeah.
just makes it
Oh,
easier to be accountable and to really work together collaboratively. So I love that you do that. And more of us should really emulate that.
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. And really quick, let me review some things about psychological safety. Because there's a lot of research and learning that I've done comes from Timothy Clark and Amy Edmondson. And Timothy Clark wrote a great book called The Four Stages of Psychological Safety. Stage number one is included. I mean, everybody wants to be
Mhm.
included, right? So we want to make sure that we help people feel included and learning. People want to learn, right? And so safe to
Mhm.
learn. So Trina, when you say that, you acknowledge that we did well or we did not do well, everybody wants to learn. So we want to make sure we remember that.
Mhm.
Stage number three is contribute. I mean, who doesn't have an idea every now and again, right? And so everybody
Mhm.
wants to contribute. They want to feel safe to contribute. What that reminds me of is when I started a new job several years ago. I was in a new job. I was in like month 6 or 7, and I had an idea, and I wanted to share it with my boss, and I shared it with her. And here's what she said: "We don't really need you to come up with ideas like that. We just need you to implement what we roll out."
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and this was before I knew about psychological safety, but I tell you what, I wasn't feeling safe, and you know what I
Mm.
did the rest of the time I worked there? I knew my role, but it wasn't safe to contribute. So that's what
Mhm.
that reminds me of. So as we're thinking and talking about psychologically safe, we want to think about, are we helping people feel included? Are we helping them to learn? Are they able to contribute? And the last one is challenge, right? Challenger, recommending something that might be different from the status quo. So it's interesting as we take a look at that. And now what I want to do is, Vanessa, you have this term that you use called the Supreme Court rule. What is that?
Well, being a lawyer, the absolute peak moment for me was being able to have a tour of the Supreme Court through one of the private docents, which are sort of like, I don't know, like the ushers, but they're very, very knowledgeable. And we did this on a Saturday, so I didn't get to see any of the really ins and outs and how it works. But one of the things that struck me and really stuck with me for years was when we got to the room where the justices deliberate and they talk about the cases. Each of them goes around the room once before a second one is able to speak. So I refer to that as the Supreme Court rule. And I try to emulate that with my meetings because if the Supreme Court, who are making the most important decisions in this country, if they can do that and not talk over each other and let every person have an opportunity to speak, why can't the rest of us do that? So I
Mhm.
Amen.
try hard to
Mhm.
let people have an opportunity to talk. It doesn't always work, especially in law firms where lawyers just love to talk. And I'm guilty of it myself. But one of the things I'll do is if I am in a meeting and I notice someone hasn't talked, especially in like the Zoom setting, I will say,
Mhm.
Amy, you've been really quiet, which is not like you. Did you want to share something? And it's totally okay if you don't want to share, but if you do, we'd love to hear what your view is. And then
Mm.
that makes them feel comfortable sort of piping up. But if we could all stick to the Supreme Court rule, I wouldn't have to do that. I wouldn't have to out anybody.
That's exactly right. And what you're doing is you're helping people feel safe to contribute, right? You're making sure that they are heard and get a chance to be understood. I want to point out a couple comments here from some people in our audience. Chanel, thank you, Chanel. Collaboration has gone down, and I see a lot more competitiveness. Ooh, that's why I agree with the focus on we and the team. It's strange to me to be treated as a threat when I just want to help, right? Oh my goodness. Thank
Yeah.
you, Chanel. And Abigail said, love the reminder, Trina, that there's truly safety in numbers. So we got some good engagement. Definitely appreciate that. We really definitely appreciate that for our members. Now, for our audience, so here's our next question. We talked about that. So empathy. This is a learned skill, right? I mean, it is a learned skill. So Loretta, you talked about the importance of empathy because we're talking about behavior, right? To lead psychologically safe teams. So help us understand the value of empathy.
Well, we have to be accountable for, as leaders, we have to be accountable for understanding that empathy is truly a part of mental health and wellness. It's part of leadership. One of the things I also like to create frameworks for with regard to approaching this subject matter is taking the workforce, the monolithic idea of having a workforce out of the question, and it shouldn't be part of the equation. This is not the, hey, you can't see the forest for the trees. This is a situation where we need to see the trees. We need to identify that every single one of those trees is an individual human with health and wellness that is owed to them, as is owed to us as leaders. So in order for us to have a trustworthy environment that we're building, one with integrity to make people feel the cornerstones of psychological wellness, some of them you named, Michelle, with regard to the study that you were discussing, but belonging and competence. And Trina with the collaborative that's part of showing and embracing and encouraging an element of competence. So we need to continue to foster that. We need to make people feel that they do belong. We need to make them feel that they are competent in this space. And that's what empathy is all about. I feel for you. I understand your situation. I engage with you in that because I have them as well. So that will build the trustworthiness and the relationship and the partnership between you and your colleagues, and again, direct reports and those to whom you report. You know, leadership is an action word, and it's more than just I'm a leader and I'm going to apply all of our goals and objectives, and I need a SWOT goal, and I need our SMART goals, and I need, it's beyond that. It's how do you enlighten this to create relationships so that people feel safe, they feel belong, they feel competent, and they have agency. That's what empathy looks like.
I love that you gave those examples. I feel this. I'm engaged with you on that. Thank you for those examples. It is critical. I want to share with you a few of the comments that are coming in. Love the Supreme Court rule. They love that idea. Amen. Leading people first. So thank you again to our audience for engaging with us. Really making a big difference. Now, another thing that I want to talk about that kind of goes along with empathy, and that is asking questions. Leaders must ask questions, and we have to make it safe for people to ask questions, right? This reminds me of another boss I used to have, but this is a positive example. And that is when I was new in a job, and I think I had a question. I was like, this is probably going to be a dumb question. And here's what he said: Michelle, there is no such thing as a dumb question. The only dumb question is the one that remains unasked. And that sticks with me so much today. But Vanessa, you were talking about asking questions, and so tell us a little bit more about how you encourage people to speak up and feel safe to speak up, feel safe to learn, feel safe to contribute. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, when you're in meetings or discussions, I do want people to ask questions, because if you don't ask a question, there's the risk that there's not full understanding, mistakes will be made, and people are naturally curious. So letting people lean into that curiosity is really important. So I will always check in and say questions, comments, and if I get the crickets that you get sometimes, I'll just say, well, what are your thoughts on that? How does this sound to you? And I'll use language that may encourage someone to share without labeling it as a question. And if it's, I try to lead by example too. I'll ask questions of my colleagues in the meeting, and that way perhaps we can foster additional feedback. But if people see that it's safe that I'm actually asking questions as well, then they too should feel comfortable asking questions. And
Okay.
of
See, that's
course,
great.
your response has to be positive. It can't be like, oh my gosh, that
Mhm.
was the stupidest question I've ever heard. Even if maybe in your brain you might be thinking, oh my God, I can't believe they asked that question. We might have to revisit. But if you take every question seriously and
Yeah,
kindly and deal with it, you're going to get a much better,
exactly.
productive, efficient result.
Mhm.
And and curiosity. Everybody, is curious, and we need to
Mhm.
respect that and appreciate that, right? And here's a couple comments. Melinda said, "We always say that asking questions is a strength in our organization, not a weakness." So that totally aligns with what you were saying, Vanessa.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, she loved that. The only dumb question is one not asked. And then Vicky said, "Listening to understand, not to reply." Yeah,
Very
is
important,
so
Vicky. Very,
important.
very important. So
Hmm.
many times when you're talking about something, you're so busy thinking about your next talking point, the next issue you need to address, that you're not really listening to the feedback or questions that you're getting. So, very good point, Vicky.
Hmm. Thank you.
Mhm. I just also wanted to say about asking questions also is making sure that people feel acknowledged for their question,
Hmm.
and saying, and Michelle, you're really good at this. That's a great question. Or
Oh,
I'm so glad you asked that question. Or I actually had that question myself. Particularly when you come across people who maybe don't really want to ask the question, but Vanessa, to your point, maybe you called on them, so now they have to ask the question that they have, but acknowledging, why asking that question is so important. I think it loosens people up and makes them feel safe to ask the next question.
mm-hmm.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for that. Yeah, 100%. And you know what? Just really quick to wrap that part up. So I knew we would have so much to talk about. We might have to do a part two on this conversation. But to that point, we want to make sure when we encourage people to ask questions and we listen to them, they feel as though we care about them, and that does align with
Mhm.
psychological safety, doesn't it? Because like, hey, you know what, your
Yep.
thought, your opinion, it matters.
You matter, right? People need to know that they matter
Right.
because the world is constantly telling us that we don't. Because you have
Yeah,
to fit a model, you have to fit a box, you have to fit,
Yeah.
in some type of structure in order to really be counted. And
Yeah.
so we
right.
need to know that we matter in the workplace.
And I'll just
Exactly. Yeah.
I'll just add one more point on the listening part of, which goes along with questioning, is I try to practice active listening, which I will do by saying, I thought I heard you say,
Mm,
or I'm hearing blah blah blah, and that
mhm,
way that gives the person the opportunity to correct if
mhm,
I've misheard. It
mhm.
also makes them feel that acknowledged and recognize that they've contributed. Someone is out there listening, and to me, I think that provides a very safe space for going back and forth. And I've gotten in the habit of doing that because sometimes it's for a selfish reason. I want to make sure that I've really got it. But the other hand,
Exactly.
I do want people to feel comfortable having conversations. It's really
That's a
important to
great,
me.
great
Mhm.
practice. That's a really good practice. I want to talk about communicating expectations because, if we help people understand what we expect, then they'll feel safer, right? And so,
Mhm.
Trina, you talked a little bit about that. Can you share a little bit more about what you do to make sure that you communicate expectations with your team?
I do. I go over what I'm expecting, what success looks like, what will happen in terms of if something is successful, and what will happen if it's not, so that people are very clear about what they're getting into. They're very clear about what will happen if they go this way or go that way. And it's great because then, regardless of what happens, I can bring that back to that conversation, initial conversation about expectations, and people aren't shocked. They're not scared. They know exactly what they can expect to happen, good
Hmm.
or bad. And so
Right.
what I find is, again, that body language, and I think that's probably why people feel safe about saying, you know what, that was my fault, it was my mistake. Because people know a mistake does not mean you're going to get yelled at, you're going to get fired, we're just going to figure out how to make it better. So if you know
Ooh,
that's the expectation, then
ooh,
you
yeah.
feel safe about saying that was my fault.
Mm. Awesome. Yeah. And the other thing too is probably the tonality makes a big difference too. So watching it and the way that we say it does help determine whether or not people feel safe or not.
And
Um,
also, Trina, I'd like to dovetail that to say how important that approach is because it creates buy-in. It
Yeah.
informs the individual of what their goal, their role is in this particular project, and therefore they're part of it now. It isn't just I'm exercising and executing a task, but this is us together. So that creates the relationship that is needed to bring it full circle to say this is we as a team. So it creates
mhm,
that collective, and that
mhm,
again is part of
And
conflict.
I will say sometimes even if I have an issue, so I'll give you an example. I like everything to be very organized. I can't help it. I just am like that.
Mhm.
And so my team knows
I
if
can vouch
if
for that.
our training supplies aren't put back, I am going to be upset. So I'm just letting you know now. So they know that. So they're expecting me to be upset if it's not organized. But even though I know, hey, that's my issue, but now at least you know what the expectation is and how I will probably respond if that expectation is not met.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. We have such good conversation. I tell you what, we only have about 4 more minutes, and so I knew this time would just go too fast. I want to get to this. I know. I know. I'm going to have to ask y'all if you're willing to do a part two, and then I'm going to have to ask our audience if they'd be willing to come back for part two. But really quick, so Loretta, you said this, and I want to quote because I called it "allow space for external realities." Don't expect for people to
Mm.
check in at the door and get to the grind. And this kind of goes back to what we were saying before in terms of mental health and well-being. Can you elaborate about how you do that?
Yes. Social issues, global impact, local and from a global and a local perspective, things happen in the world. From political upheaval, we see brutality of murders. We're constantly inundated with what's taking place around us before we even step into the environment of our office. We have a feeling about that. What does
Mm,
that look like to us? What if there was a great and atrocious event that occurred for a woman, for a Black person, a Latino, for a leader, an American, and pick a group.
yeah,
We
right.
belong to one or many, all of us, and we have an emotion about that. And there cannot be this expectation that when we arrive to the workplace, we
Mm.
walk into the office and, all right, now let's get to work. We have this meeting. I need to know where are you with this? Where are you with that? It's can I have a minute? I remember when there was a court hearing and a verdict that was announced on TV about an issue a couple of years ago that was racially charged. And I had to sit at my computer and pause. I needed a moment to pause before I can engage. So we as leaders need to allow that for those with whom
Right.
we work because it
Exactly.
matters. And then if
So
needed,
much.
talk about it. Mhm.
So much. And
That's
then
awesome.
you know what? I know we could have just so much more conversation. Before we go though, and here's what and you know what? I'm gonna ask our audience to kind of like take a challenge, right? Oh, Tom said, I want part two. Yay. All right, Tom. Thank you. Because we didn't get to half the things we could have. But it is Women's History Month. It's March. So anybody, what kind of thoughts do you have in terms of all the behaviors that we're talking about today? We're a women panel. What kind of thoughts do you have about how we can acknowledge these behaviors in honor of Women's History Month?
But I will say one of the things I just heard a study done, and it said that women actually, based on this study, were actually better leaders. And I think it has to do with empathy, right?
Mm,
And I think it has to do with some of the characteristics we bring that now they're discovering is what really makes great leaders,
mm,
right? So
mm.
if you had told someone empathy was one of your biggest strengths, right,
Right,
10 years ago, it's a
right.
much different response, right? And now they're coming to
Exactly.
find out what this actually makes. So to women everywhere who paved the way, that other women could come behind them and show what a great leader that they could be.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that. And because of our time, yeah, here we go. Look at Abigail. Abigail's our supportive woman behind the scenes. And what we want to be able to do is have you get in touch with us. I got some more feedback that part two would be great. And so panel, if you're willing, I think we should do this because there's a lot to unpack here. But what we want you to do is to know how to reach out to each and every one of us, because we're happy to connect. So be sure and reach out to Trina, Vanessa, Loretta, and myself. And I want to end with actually this post here that Tom did. He said it's all about leadership and building trusting relationships with our people. People want their leaders to be competent, know how to do their jobs and lead and have good character, practice good values and do the right thing. Woo, amen. And care about and take care of them. People want to know that you care and that you have their best interests at heart. Fix the leader, fix the problem. I think people will feel safe when leaders have built relationships based upon trust. Everyone will feel valued. And he went on to say that everyone will feel valued and ... So, wow, what a way to end it. So, Trina, Vanessa, Loretta, thank you so much. And Abigail, thank you for your behind the scenes. So much power. So be on the lookout for part 2. We'll have to coordinate. Be on the lookout for it. I think this is an ongoing subject. So we thank you for joining. And with that, in honor of everyone's time, we appreciate all your engagement too. Thank you so much. Let's build psychologically safe teams. We'll end the broadcast.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody.